Welcome into the Tech Ed Podcast. My name is Matt Kirkner. I am your host. We are talking this week about emerging technologies and how do emerging technologies relate to the markets, to investment, to M&A, to education, all types of aspects of what's coming in the future, what's here now that we may not even know about. We're going to talk about that, all of that, with Dayton Horvath. Dayton is the Director of Emerging Technology and Investments for AMT. Dayton, awesome to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we've had folks from AMT on with us. It's probably been a couple years. So remind our audience a little bit about what the organization does and what your role is.
Sure. So AMT, the Association for Manufacturing Technology, is the owner and operator of IMTS, what most people can know and recognize every 2 years here in Chicago.
Sure. Yeah.
AMT, in addition to running the biggest trade show in the hemisphere for manufacturing, provides a wide range of services to its members and the broader manufacturing technology community. I'm responsible for emerging technologies, market research, and advisory services. So products and services as it relates to helping companies increase their sales, decrease their costs, and manage risk.
Awesome. So, I think about AMT and certainly was aware that you own IMTS, which is just insane. I don't know. Do you know how many people are here this week?
So I know we're ahead of 2022 numbers already, which was around 86,000, if I recall. So we're getting close to six figures.
Yeah, closing in on 100,000 people. So think about that. 100,000 people coming to Chicago, Illinois to check out all the great things, all the advancing technologies in manufacturing. It's a great time to be in manufacturing. I love being able to have conversations like this one with all the innovation that's taking place. So talk about AMT's role in that. You spend a lot of time identifying and communicating emerging technologies in manufacturing. Talk about that and how that works.
Yeah, so AMT, as this nonprofit trade organization, is responsible for paying attention to what is happening in manufacturing technology so that we can measure it and talk about it meaningfully with our members, especially when it comes to innovation and disruption. So AMT traditionally came from the machine tool side of things, cutting and machining. We also cover forming and fabricating equipment, industrial automation and robotics, industrial software, anything from CAD, CAM, CA, PLM, the whole alphabet soup from an acronym standpoint.
Right.
These are all things that have come into play and become core to the direction the industry's moving from an efficiency and operational standpoint. And then you've got newer entrants like additive manufacturing, invented 30 plus years ago, but we're only now starting to see the real benefits of it. And that's why we have a whole sector of it, 70 plus companies in the West Hall today.
So how do you stay in touch with all this? How do you go about, your role of keeping track of emerging technologies? Do you just get up and go online every day and just check stuff out, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the sources are far and wide. I've got a small analyst team, technical backgrounds that work with me. We start online oftentimes because that's where we check on what's going on in terms of press releases, primary sources. We hit 6 to 8 trade shows every year internationally. We always go to Formnext every November in Frankfurt, the biggest additive show. We try to cover some of the other emerging tech shows as well. And a combination of talking with our members and others in the industry, as well as with the online and even third-party databases. We're not afraid of going after other consulting groups or data providers. We check everything we get from them. And that's the hope, is that through this, we become that first point of contact for anyone looking to understand how to get smarter about the industry.
So you speak really fluently about advancing technologies, whether it's additive, whether it's robotics, automation, of course now AI. You can't walk by a booth here without somebody talking about artificial intelligence. Where did you learn all this stuff? How did you gain your knowledge?
I took a few side steps in my career. I started out thinking I wanted to get into materials science and engineering, R&D. I was fascinated with the extremes. So, 4 years of chemistry as a bachelor's, and then another 3 as a master's, and realized that, I enjoy the business side and talking about the technology and what it has to do to make an impact in terms of industry, not just in terms of academic and R&D applications. And so that's when I got into market research and then consulting, And then investment banking, mostly on the sell side for M&A and capital raises in additive manufacturing specifically.
Okay.
That led me to AMT. And so I've had an opportunity to see both the technical and the business side of how this industry functions. And that's put me in a great position to think about how we can help those companies every day.
Absolutely. So speaking of helping those companies, you're going out, whether you're learning things online, you're going to shows, you're talking to manufacturers, you're talking to technologists, you're looking at third-party material, you're gathering all this information. How do those insights get communicated to your members?
Yeah, so there's a few things that AMT offers. The members of AMT get a research request member benefit, and we can put together up to a couple hours of analyst work in one or more deliverables. Anyone that's a member can request this, and to the extent we're able to answer it, we'll do our best. Beyond that, I've, over the last 2.5 years, been putting together an additive database that represents the entire ecosystem in a Wikipedia-style interface that allows you to connect between companies, processes, the products, namely the printers, the material classes, the news items, the investment events, even getting into the market size and growth. We've got all that on one platform that we just launched to America Makes as one of our biggest customers to give their members access, which I think is a great way to start pushing forward with, hey, we want the industry to be able to have these basic resources without the extreme cost of having to go through consultancies or buying various market reports and data sets and having to do all the work themselves.
America Makes being one of the manufacturing institutes, and so you're pushing this information out to your members, you're pushing it out to partners of America Makes. Is it an app? Is it a software platform? What is it?
It's actually a self-serve database. It's not too different from if you're doing some online shopping, anything that has those filters on the left side, if you're filtering for price or a certain feature. You can do the same thing going through products, companies, news, investments. And the hope there is that it's easy to browse, search, and filter down to what you're looking for. And if you have questions, reach out to the team that built it. And that's really where I think the value add long-term will come, is that you got to be able to trust that data. So until you can talk to the analyst that's behind it, you may not feel as confident as if you had come in and said, okay, where did all this come from? Well, AMT, owner and operator of IMTS, and the one that runs the benchmarking surveys for the industry for the last 30 years, and the industry trusts us with their data, that's who's behind it.
Got it. So you've got this incredible brand, obviously, in the form of AMT. People in manufacturing know that if you're going to be putting this information out there, it's going to be quality data. You've done your research, you've vetted the information, and now they just have the ability to access it as they look at emerging technologies in manufacturing. So how does this relate to the Emerging Technology Advisory Service? And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that advisory service is taking the additive database, because let's face it, at the end of the day, browsing through data is only so useful.
Right.
Having a conversation with somebody who put it together is by far more valuable. And to the extent you need to be in more places than one, the Emerging Technology Advisory Service is the collection of not just the database, but also regular access to the analysts and myself, where whether you're asking about market size, growth, product positioning, what your peers are doing and saying in terms of white papers and applications, or going to trade shows that you don't have the resources to attend and we're going to, you can keep a pulse on the industry using this advisory service. It's an annual subscription that we hope fits that middle ground between the big picture consulting projects and the really granular market reports that at the end of the day are kind of out of date by the time you buy them, because it takes months for those to get put together properly. And this service, pick up the phone, send us an email. We're there to be responsive and to build that relationship with you as a part of the industry long term.
So you literally have like a red phone right into the analysts that are gathering all this information and looking at it and drawing conclusions and so on. You mentioned it's a subscription service. Who's this available to? Anybody that wants it?
Just about anyone that wants it. Anyone that's a participant in our industry or looking to get into it can be a subscriber. There's even some support for startups. It doesn't have to be the corporates that are taking this in as one other part of their market research capability. And I'd say the one area we haven't explored, but we would love to in the near term, is how to work better with educators and those developing curricula as it relates to additive manufacturing and emerging technologies generally, because we got all this great data, additive process illustrations, and at the end of the day, most of our members are the commercial industry, not the professors and the universities that, I think would benefit from this immensely.
Well, we may have some ideas for you on that in another conversation, but while we're sticking on this particular topic, so if let's say I'm a mid-sized manufacturing company, I'm a subscriber to the service, what kind of problems am I solving, or what am I running into, or what am I trying to do that I would pick up the red phone and call right into your team?
Yeah. So, let's take it from the top down. Business planning and strategy. Most of the manufacturing technology companies, because they're technology providers or distributors of that technology, are trying to figure out what end markets and what applications their tools are going to be best for. Mm-hmm. So if they're looking to enter a new area, they can call us and say, hey, we know what aerospace and defense looks like. We know what energy and automotive look like, but we haven't looked at medical much lately, for example. Can you help us understand where our tools or other similar tools have been gaining traction, if that's the case? And so we would go through our data and third-party data that we can pull from to put together a summary about what's going on, and then even provide an initial list of companies and leads at those companies so that they can test those initial conversations to see if this is the direction they want to go. Those are the types of things from a biz dev and sales standpoint. Other times it's market positioning in terms of, what type of differentiators do you want to put on your website when you're bringing this product to market? And do you want to say the same thing that everyone else is saying? Or do you want to say something different? We can help you get there because we have a good sense of who is in that market with what that product is meant to do.
Sounds like an absolutely awesome idea when it comes to making sure that people are staying informed on all these emerging technologies. And I know there's lots of things happening across the manufacturing landscape. You've got a tremendous amount of focus and experience on additive. So I want to talk about that market just a little bit. What are some of those trends you're watching in additive, Dayton, that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I'd say a really interesting trend, and I'll start with a positive one here because there are some less than positive ones lately, has been the switch, at least the switch in part from investment, particularly from venture groups, going towards application companies rather than the core technology developers and providers. So
to help us understand application versus core technology, define those two.
Sure. If you're making a 3D printer or you're providing general part production or prototyping services using 3D printers, those are considered core capabilities. Even the post-processing I'd consider to be core. But if you look at an application company, they take additive as one of the tools in the toolbox to bring some sort of performance, cost, or time advantage to their product coming to market for a specific application or industry. For example, heat exchangers for Formula One is a wonderful example of additive capabilities. And so more and more investment in the last 2.5 years has shifted. There's still a lot going into these core technology companies, but there's equally as much now moving towards these application companies because they recognize that there's value in the productization, if you will, of the additive capabilities. It's just one of the benefits that manufacturing technology is bringing these companies.
Got it. So one trend is seeing more and more interest in activity in the application side. Not that the core technology is going away or isn't also seeing interest, but we're seeing acceleration on the application side. You said that was a positive one. Do you have a negative trend?
Well, the report I presented on just a couple of days ago at the Investor Forum showed that the total dollars globally from venture capital going into any of the additive categories, this core materials, hardware, software, or the applications, is less than half of what it was in 2023. 23 was about 1.2 billion. If we continue on pace for 24 here, we're lucky to see 600 million globally. So
Interesting.
capital availability is a huge problem for companies that are not yet profitable because they're still in that commercialization and scale up time frame where they have repeatable and regular customers that they can go to for whether it's part production or buying equipment.
So what do you think is driving that? I mean, we've seen, I watch the additive space, certainly not the way that you do, but you think about, some of the companies that maybe went through the SPAC thing a couple of years ago,
yes.
special purpose acquisition companies, and that didn't necessarily work out so well for some of those investors. We've obviously got some macroeconomic trends like, interest rates being high and so on. But what do you think is driving the slowdown in investment?
Yeah, I think you hit a few of them. The interest rates, the general aversion. There's a new lower tolerance for risk these days that a lot of the investors are looking at. The cost of capital's changed enormously, and the valuations that we saw in 2021 with that SPAC craze,
right?
They've dropped to 5-10% of that.
It's crazy. I'm not going to name any names, but I watch a couple of them, and it's embarrassing what's happening in that market.
And some of them have even delisted or properly gone out of business, gone into receivership, and found a new home the hard way, the really hard way, unfortunately. That lack of sustainable growth, I think, has further hurt the hype that the industry had. And a lot of investors are taking that public market view and applying it to the private companies that don't necessarily deserve it to the same extent. And I think that's a bit of a disservice to some of the hardest working entrepreneurs in additive and additive adjacent companies that they didn't take the money, but they're having the same struggles to raise the capital that now they're in a position to take on and do something that, maybe they weren't ready 3 years ago or 5 years ago, but now they're stuck in an environment that's twice as difficult to raise that capital a first time around that maybe otherwise would have been there. Thankfully, there's some hope coming from the industrial policy side, the Department of Defense, and really just the federal government generally has taken a more positive stance on industrial policy. It's something that is worth talking about.
Right.
Dual use technologies supporting the industrial base in America, never mind the defense or the submarine industrial base more specifically. Those are all trends that I think are a net positive, and I hope to see more and more of that coming out. The Office of Strategic Capital is one group that's started to make a name for themselves and trying to understand how to help the 14 critical technologies that the DoD is named, and additive fits into multiple categories within the 14.
And at the same time, it might be an opportunity for investors, right? I mean, if we've got fewer dollars chasing these deals, we're going to see, multiples and valuations come down. And as a result of that, if somebody does have some dry powder sitting on the sidelines, maybe it is the right time to get into some of these emerging technologies, including additive from an acquisition or investment standpoint.
Now you're thinking like an investor.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So we'll see what happens in the coming years. Speaking of those coming years, would love to hear, what you're kind of expecting in the additive space in the next 5 to 10 years. Dayton, as far as what are some of the challenges in addition to the ones that you've already shared that market is going to face, and then where do you see the biggest opportunities?
Yeah, so if you've followed additive at all, aerospace and defense and medical and dental continue to be the strongest markets that benefit from it because they're either lot size of one, you've got full customization on anything to do with the human body, or you've got price insensitivity on anything on the high end for aerospace and defense, Formula One, high-end automotive, things of this sort. Even on the energy space, industrial gas turbines. But then, in terms of what's coming, I think consumer packaged goods, we're going to start to see more and more things that are higher volume and consumer driven. I'm pretty excited to see where we're going to go in terms of the, I'd say, less noteworthy applications. General industrial, where additive was 15, 20 years ago, was if you weren't doing it for prototyping, you were behind. Today, I would like to think that more and more of the molds tooling side of the industry,
work holding,
the perfect complement to your traditional CNC machining, as well as injection molding. If you're not using additive to shortcut your molds and tooling capabilities, I'd say you're going to be behind in the next few years. And I think that's going to help the industry build some of that stability and trust on both the materials side and the process side that I think has been lacking because everyone's just waiting to see what happens. And let's face it, those industries are slower adopters than the high tech price is no object industries that we've seen prevalent to date.
Yeah, you think about mold making, you think about fixturing, and we can now do things, more intricate parts in some cases. We can do them faster, we can do them lighter. We're not waiting necessarily for possibly even an organization offshore to build a tool for us or build a work holding fixture. We can do that immediately right in our own facility or work with a service bureau to do it for us. I mean, so many great ways for us to access the technology related to additive. And I think the other thing that is getting lost on manufacturers is the tolerances that we're able to hold in some cases as well. So you think about both. Yeah, I think about like a company like Creaform doing 3D scanning and being able to scan a part to under 70 microns over the course of something as big as a freight car. You think about B9 Creations being able to 3D print parts now that are holding tolerances of 50 microns. And it's just, are you seeing the same thing in terms of the tolerance side of things?
Absolutely. The processes continue to get better and better, especially companies like B9 Creations. I would say, they're going downstream and thinking about a more volume oriented approach to helping companies. I mean, Exact Metal's another great example.
Absolutely.
If you bring the price of the systems down to a point where it's more accessible to companies that have already been in from a desktop and desktop professional standpoint.
Sure. Yeah.
The Form Labs, the Ultimakers of the world.
Right.
I think there's a scenario there where, the transition becomes a little more fluid, and those that are already additive curious and familiar are now ready to step into, okay, we played with it for, holding your hand prototyping. Let's see what else we can do with this. And as those trends come, together, from prices coming down, performance naturally getting better, whether it's tolerances, whether it's speed, whether it's just precision across multiple machines.
Right.
So you're talking short run production at that point. These are all great angles that I think I want to see more of from exhibitors, not just the high 6 and mid 7-figure laser powder bed fusion giants out there.
Yep, exactly. And by the way, I'll just make note that Sean Anderson and Juan Mario Gomez paid us no money for those plugs there on their technologies at B9 and at Exact Metal, but great, awesome companies, and just two examples of, I think, a lot of the organizations that are innovating in the additive space. And as much as we reach a lot of technical educators, we reach a lot of instructors, professors at the university level, and I know this isn't necessarily your sweet spot in terms of your role at AMT, but I know you engage with our colleges and universities. What kind of conversations are you having at that level, and what should our professors, deans, chancellors at the university level be thinking about with regard to emerging tech?
There's a lot, but I'd say the starting point should be to have an awareness for how manufacturing technology is becoming a more and more popular angle. It's not what are the 3Ds? Dark, dirty, dangerous,
right? Yeah.
There's an advanced manufacturing angle here that is really starting to bring in that software first workflow. You've got full on automation. I mean, the Emerging Technology Center here at IMTS has a future foundry manufacturing cell, which is actually 5 cells put together. Take a look at things like that. I mean, we have the 10-year anniversary of the Strati,
right?
And if you look at one of the booths in East here, Hexagon brought a Zinger car. You'd look at the Strati 10 years ago and a car like that's also heavily using additive manufacturing. You're like, okay, that's what a decade looks like. Now take that and apply it to the next decade and think about, what do your students, both the continuing ed and the full-time students, want to come in and think, how are you going to prepare them? They need to be aware of the technologies that are coming into play, because even if they don't end up going in that particular direction, they may be the future entrepreneurs that take advantage of that in our industrial base going forward.
That's a really prescient observation about the Stratty to the, you called it the Zinger? Is that
that's
the hexagon
the
car?
hypercar they've got there.
Yeah, but I love the point that you made about that's what a decade looks like, right? So looking at the Stratty versus the Zinger, and that's what a decade of innovation looks like. And that, I think I'm gonna, after we leave the booth, probably take my phone and go snap a couple photos. And did you come up with that on your own?
I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a bit of a auto and motorcycle enthusiast, so
Okay.
I try to keep a closer eye on those things, and I can't wait for it to come down to the point where it's in something that I can afford.
Yeah, for sure. Right. What kind of bike do you ride?
I've got 2 Ducatis and an Aprilia.
Okay,
So,
got it. Awesome.
Love the Italians.
Yeah, for sure. I was a supplier of Harley for years and years and years, and so did a ton of innovation alongside them on the manufacturing side. And so I don't ride that kind of a bike. I'm a cyclist, but certainly am fascinated by that technology as well.
Fantastic.
So as far as being fascinated by technology, thinking about amazing careers in technology, I love your background. I mean, one of my favorite things to do on the podcast is just to hear how people find their way to what they're doing now, and whether you were 20, 30 years ago, dreaming about running a technology program for an organization like AMT, or had some other career plan on your horizon, at least in your brain. Now you're doing this really, really cool stuff. You work around a lot of technology companies. You work around a lot of people that have careers in tech. What are some of those skills or personality traits you think are really important for people to have as they enter the technology world?
Well, it might be a little bit of a cliche that gets spoken often to answer these types of questions, but curiosity. There has to be that internal interest in learning something new, wanting to see what something is all about. And especially if there's some sort of instigator, whether you see it at an event, whether it's something you hear about from a friend or read about, or I guess these days it's going to be Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where you catch a little something and it's like, okay, that was actually me in grad school. I was really curious how we could get continuous carbon fiber into a polymer extrusion capability. And Markforged at that time was, probably sub 10 people, and trying to figure out where they were going to head next.
Absolutely.
And so having that curiosity is something that, don't ever give it up, but also always be willing to volunteer yourself to learn and put yourself in that position. And what I didn't do that I wish I would have done more is invested in experiences to expose myself to those types of opportunities. My first IMTS was 2018, and I can't even begin to imagine how my career might have shifted had I come out here in 2012, fresh out of undergrad.
Fascinating. Any other thoughts that you have on being that young? Let's say I'm a high school kid. I want to be curious. I want to get started earlier. Are there certain things they should be thinking about in terms of technologies they should be studying or learning about that it's going to position them well for the future?
Absolutely. I think having a little bit of a basis in computer-aided design, whether it starts from a 3D scan or a 2D drawing that they make in class or at home, or with a family member or friend, like, start there. Google SketchUp was all the rage back in the day. I don't know if it still is, but that baseline accessibility to that should be no different from your Microsoft Excel or PowerPoint at the end of the day, in my book. And as far as the hands-on, some kids are really tangible learners. I mean, I grew up, I had to fix my first car before I could drive it. And so the ability to at least know how to turn a wrench and a little exposure to the mechanical side of things gives you an appreciation for the physical world that I think has served me very well in empathizing with the challenges and the opportunities that a lot of the companies face in the manufacturing world.
Right. We all love social media. We all love our phones, but at some point put them down and go, go grab a wrench and work on something. I actually learned wrenching on bicycles when I was a kid. I mean, that was my thing. And so, finding old beat up bikes and, pulling them apart and re-greasing the bearings and putting them back together, or painting the frames or whatever. And so you wanted a bike to ride. You want the next cool bike. You had to figure out how to do it. And I think we've lost a little bit of that. So getting back into that, I also love the idea that you're aligning or comparing, CAD and computer aided design with Excel or PowerPoint. And as much as what kid going through high school isn't using Excel, what kid isn't using PowerPoint for a presentation, we should have the same exposure to CAD. I love that observation.
Yeah. I mean, when I was in college, I learned the hard way that even for a business plan competition, because I minored in business in addition to my major in chemistry, I didn't know anything about CAD. And so when it came to putting a physical product sketch together for the pitch competition or the big, end of class project there, I had to ask my little brother to put together the Google SketchUp so I could get a couple screenshots of it and throw it into my presentation.
Right.
He put it together, and it was a beautiful thing that thankfully he had that exposure in high school that I didn't. So, you never know when you can start to be that first, skill as part of a team that actually produces the visual for something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's happening long before students or individuals are getting into the workforce, right? And we need to have even more of that type of collaboration as they're going through their educational journey. I've got two more questions for you. We're going to finish off in just a minute with the question we ask every guest, but you've got this unique viewpoint and vantage point of technology. You've got your investment banking experience. If I am an individual investor, and you don't have to name specific companies, but are there 2 or 3 categories of technology that I should be thinking about if I'm going to take some of my portfolio that I want to put at risk? And, I'm not the part I'm going to retire on or put my kids through college on or whatever, but the part of it that I'm rolling the dice a little bit. What are some of those technologies they should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I do think hybrid manufacturing, which is loosely defined as additive manufacturing combined with subtractive manufacturing in the same motion control platform.
Right.
That, especially when you have inspection capabilities that start to find a way in there as well, from a high mix, low volume or a high mix, high volume standpoint, I think there's some opportunities for short to medium run production that are starting to come out. Sometimes it's an MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul.
Sure.
But even in new part production, because there's sustainability benefits that come when you mix those technologies together.
Sure.
And additive is complemented by the inspection. You need to make sure you're getting what you're getting from a materials engineering standpoint.
Right.
And so I'd say that's one to focus on. And then on the services side, we've seen a lot of success from advanced manufacturing from a services standpoint in terms of businesses that, because they have visibility to the direct end customer, they're taking their best picks from the IMTS show, putting them on the shop floor, and then they can rely on those customers across a diversified set of industries. And I think that's something that will continue to do well as from an investment standpoint.
Got it. It's interesting you bring up the hybrid manufacturing and this convergence between additive and subtractive and inspection and so on, as we're, by the way, sitting right across the aisle from a LaVille EDU mill that is a combination 3D printer and CNC machining center being serviced by a Fanuc robot with a vision system on it. So it's the exact same technology you're talking about is right across the aisle from us. So perfect timing.
I can't believe if I'm seeing that in the student summit. I would have been surprised to see that 4 or 6 years ago in the main show floor. And here it is at a level accessible for educators and students alike. And I think that's a sign of things to come, that there's a continuity that I said on the ETC here at IMTS.
ETC is Emerging Technologies
Center. That continuity that they worked out on an industrial scale, you've got it across the hall here. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to check that out. But the final question I have for you, and you're talking about, the student summit, you're talking about kids and so on, and we've actually got one looking in the window at us right now with a big smile on his face. So I want to take you all the way back to the time that you were perhaps this young man's age, or maybe just a little bit older, 15-year-old Dayton Horvath, growing up. You've got your whole life ahead of you. And if you could go back in time to give that 15-year-old high school sophomore one piece of advice, what would that be?
Go find out what the industry cares about. It took me a very long time for me to learn that. And if you understand what the industry ultimately cares about, it gives you a perspective that you won't easily find in school. And I think that's the big difference, that it took me until halfway through my role at Lux Research after my master's degree to learn truly what the various industries care about from a technology and from an innovation standpoint. And that then was able to guide my career. Before that, I was struggling to figure out where could I have the greatest impact. And you have to align with where the demand is already, unless you're really thinking decades in the future. And, maybe you were studying AI in the 90s or quantum computing in the early 2000s. Then, yeah, you're ahead of the game. But you got to be passionate about the technology for technology's sake. For me, and I think for the vast majority of people, see if you can get that demand to match a little bit of where the possibilities for your career ultimately go.
Absolutely. I love that answer. I mean, you think about whether we're a company that's trying to figure out where our market is, or a student, a 15-year-old young man that's trying to figure out what his life should look like, figure out what industry is doing, figure out what they care about, what they actually want, and then position your whole opportunity and career around what that is. And you're going to find yourself in a position where the sky is the limit and there's unlimited opportunities for you as a student as you enter the workforce. So I think that's really, really great advice. Can't thank you enough, by the way, for coming by the studio here, spending a little bit of time with me and telling us about all the great things that are happening, not just at AMT, but in the world of technology, in the world of investment banking, and in your world as well. So thanks for being with us.
No, it was a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thanks to our audience for joining us on this week's episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. I enjoyed tremendously our conversation with Dayton Horvath, the Director of Emerging Technology and Investments at AMT. He mentioned a couple of resources as we were chatting. We'll make sure we link those up in the show notes for you. You can find the show notes for this episode. And by the way, we do have the best show notes in the business. You'll find them at techedpodcast.com/Horvath. That is techedpodcast.com/HORVATH. Drew mentioned a couple social media platforms while we were chatting. That's how we have to reach this next generation of learner, this next generation of student. And when you're out there checking out social media, you will find the Tech Ed Podcast anywhere you go. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and the list goes on. So check us out on social. Let us know you're out there. We would love to hear from you. And we'd love to see you next week on the next episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. I'm Matt Kirkner. Thank you for being with us.